We are back and ready to talk containers. Now that we've decluttered and organized our items, it's time to bring in the heavy hitters, the long-awaited container conversation.
But let's be real, buying a bin doesn't organize your clutter. It organizes categories. We are going to show you today how to choose and use containers that work for your real life and your real habits, not the ones that you see necessarily on social media.
Because remember, the goal isn't to look pretty. The goal is to keep things organized, even when you're having a chaotic day.
So let's get started. If we haven't met before, my name is Adrian.
And I'm Mary.
And over the last month, we've been sharing all of our knowledge as professional organizers on how to get organized, which is five-step process in our minds. And it starts with the mindset, goes to decluttering, organizing. And then today we're kind of throwing in a bonus video around the containers, which is the bridge between organizing and optimizing. So if you haven't seen the previous videos, you could definitely just watch this video on its own, but you can also go back into our playlists and find them, and we'll leave them in the description box below, as well as our decluttering guide. And because we are going to be talking about the next steps in future weeks, make sure that you're subscribed. It really helps us here on YouTube.
And don't forget to turn on that notification bell.
Yes, good job, Mary. Yes, get that notification bell. So as we said in the beginning, bins and containers, they're tools, they're not solutions. So a bin will not organize your clutter, it organizes categories.
So for today's conversations, all bins and organizers are being called containers. I mean, that includes, clear shoe holders or racks on the back of the door, any of that. We're just using the generic term container. Now, remember, we're organizing for who you are in this season, and we want it to be as easy as possible for you to keep the items you have now organized even on the worst days. Now, do not fall into your fantasy organizer here. And we all know what that looks like. Remember, the people you see online are getting paid to have that overly organized home.
Yeah. And actually, Mary, I heard a term called hobby organizing in the past, and I thought it was a little rude because organizing is real work, right? But they were saying like to get your stuff organized, which we've been talking about, very practical solutions is one thing. But when you start doing the fancy bins and you're decluttering it and you're really becoming it more of a hobby work where you're going above and beyond what's required to keep your home or your space running correctly. So in I think that's okay in some areas, especially, as we get older in life, we have some things that we really want to have look like the magazine. Like for some people, it's their spice racks, they want it all alphabetized. For some people, maybe it's your craft section. Like you want to have all the bins and bobbits and everything where it is, and that's awesome. But to think of it as anything that you're doing that's above and beyond that minimum is then hobby work. And is that how you want to be spending your free time? So when I think about with my clients, I often talk about how many times are you touching those items, like in a day, in a week. For example, like I organized all my books. I zoned them by like these are the business books, and then I actually broke that down into like the different types of business books. And it took me a bit to do, but now they pretty much stay organized because I only touch the books like once a week, if that. So now that they're in place, they kind of just stay in place. But if I were to do that with like my coffee bar, it would look like a feral raccoon has been through it every day, and now it's becoming more of a chore, right? So, what do you care enough about, and what has enough of a touch point balance where you're not spending too much time maintaining the system?
So, why do we even buy containers? Well, they're to contain items. Duh, Mary, you think so? Yes, they're to contain items. But they also help prevent items from falling over. They manage awkward items. They also keep things together. They create boundaries on shelves or in drawers. It makes things easier to transport when we're working on projects or to move the items. I mean, let's be honest, even minimalists like trays.
Absolutely, because you could just pick it up instead of picking up all 10, 15 items. It's just in one container, which is great. The other thing is the visual effects of it. So in our house, we actually got like a glass bookcase in like our entryway, and it just looks pretty. So we brought like the more decorative bins for that area.
Mhm.
And even though I'm a visual organizer, the decorative bins are like they're just pretty, and it makes me happy when I come in my home. So my bin is actually part of my decor.
Yes, and then that leads us into the whole conversation around like opaque versus clear bins, because those sound like, are they clear bins or opaque bins when you walk into your room?
They're very pretty. I'll post the picture up here, but they are like they are like Hobby Lobby floral boxes so that they all match. And honestly, Mary, most of them are empty because I'm a visual organizer, so I never think like, oh, I got to open a container, then I got to open the glass door, open the bin, put the item in. So they're more of like our very infrequently used items in there, if not empty, but they look so pretty. So, and I have like trays that I do that with too. Like I got a pottery tray. Like, is it the most optimal? No, but it makes me really happy to look at it. So sometimes that's why you buy the bin.
And that's an example of hobby organizing. And there's nothing wrong with that. Small contained areas, you make it pretty, it makes you feel good. It's stuff you're not using over and over again, and you don't have to access it.
Yeah.
So that's a great example of kind of the hobby organizing where you really zhuzhed it up. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what we're going to talk a little bit about is the opaque versus the clear containers, because you talk about
Hmm.
how your floral boxes, you don't see in them, you don't know what's. So let's talk about it. At this stage of life, personally, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist. I forget I have it. So for me, and it's a lot of it's based on organizing style, I prefer clear containers. However, people that get visually overstimulated frequently prefer opaque containers because it's not so overwhelming when they don't see everything. Maybe having fabric bins that look the same on the outside, but can be changed inside.
And that's what I did in my office here is that each bin has its own organizing system, but it's just not as overwhelming with all those colors. Because even being a visual person, and Mary, I know you are too,
Um,
and everything's visual, nothing's visual, right? It can become an overwhelm for you when you see all those items. The other thing on this, Mary, is just like we mentioned in our last video, just keep in mind that if you are a visual organizer, and we will drop the link to the Clutterbug quiz, which helps you understand this. When you're organizing, think vertical. So like pegboards, which I know, Mary, you have, think things that are going up the wall because that's going to make it a little bit more visual without as much clutter. And then if you're a hidden organizer, you're going to do more horizontal. You don't want to see a ton of stuff on your walls.
yes, because vertical is visual, horizontal is hidden.
Yes. And of course, labeling is key. So again, calling myself out, but I personally wanted those bins to be beautiful, right? So I didn't want to put a label on them. But if I wanted to use those functionally, what I would do is I would label them. And again, if you're more visual or you live with people who are more visual, this is a great compromise because you could just put a label that's ideally you can see across the room what it is, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they're like, okay, this is clearly where cats and gloves go. This is where the shoes go. Like they know where all those things are. And then like I like to have fun with my labels because I want to make sure my husband's actually reading them, you know? So I changed them out. But like we were doing our pantry little area and we have like a bunch of liquor. We're not big drinkers, but we have like, some that we picked up on travel or whatever. And so we
Mhm.
don't use it a lot. So I labeled it as a box of spirits.
Baltic spirits. I like that.
Just for curiosity, maybe he'll open it. And then we have like some, like first aid stuff because we do live a little bit more rural, so we need more than just your basic aspirin and stuff. So we have our
Mhm.
basic aspirin organized, but then we have a shelf that has like the massagers and ice packs and heat packs for when you get an injury. And then we have like, are you dying tier? So like the bottom shelf, which hopefully we don't ever have to use, is like, do you
Oh,
need bleed stop? Do you need a tourniquet? Like it's in here. And then we put like the heating pads because we're like, well, if you're injured, you don't want to be bending all the way over, right? So we
mhm.
have that labeled up there, like feel good items, and then we list out what's inside of those.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
And one of the things I do with my clients, I do have a little bit in my own home, but definitely when I'm working with clients, is I make a map. I know we talk about labeling like the bin, but sometimes I'll label the bookcase and be like, especially the bin's like too deep or they hid something behind it. Like I was working with a client and they had this big pendulum from a grandfather clock, and I'm like, they're gonna forget where that is. So we just put a sticker on the bookcase saying, hey, behind all this is the grandfather clock pendulum. Or like I've organized a lot of offices and they have like those traditional desks where you have like the three or four drawers. And we might
Mhm.
have a drawer that says files. Well, what files? What specifically is in there? And so it's a little bit too much to put on the label on the drawer, or maybe you don't want everybody knowing what's in there. So we'll just make a Word document, just something simple, and then they have it for them to reference so they know where their things are.
Right. And they can either attach it to, if it's out in the garage, you can attach it to the shelving or put it on a desk drawer or wherever. I love that idea of mapping.
Yeah. And it's also good for when you just have like a one-off item and you're like, where do we put this?
Mhm.
Just having that place for it.
Another reason you may want to buy containers is to optimize the space, but you want to buy containers to fill the area so there is no dead space. Now, it needs to work with your items too. Let me give you a good example. Lazy Susans. Some people love Lazy Susans, some people hate Lazy Susans. Neither here nor there. Many kitchens have a built-in Lazy Susan. And I think one of the interesting organizing containers is those pie-shaped pieces that are designed to fit on the Lazy Susan. Well, it's brilliant. And people are like, I have to have that. Well, that depends on what you're putting in the Lazy Susan. If you are storing like your large kitchen equipment, like your mixers and your Cuisinarts and your blenders and all of that, those pie things aren't really going to be that successful in holding the equipment and all the attachments. But they may be successful if you're storing a lot of soft goods like beans or flour or sugar or kind of off shape items. So you really have to think about what you want to store in that area so that the container fits your needs. Also, if you have some emptiness, that gives you room to grow, and that is an outstanding thing. Empty space is not bad. And we're going to talk more about this later, but measure, measure, and measure some more. You gotta measure twice, buy once. I keep saying measure twice, buy once, to make sure that that container is going to fit the space properly. And let's be honest, I have never seen a container that fit a space, particularly a drawer or a cabinet, exactly. It's that's a unicorn, but we're always looking for it.
Yeah, some other ideas that what we've done with our clients, Mary, is like having stack boxes. If you have like photos, like you can get those photo boxes that stack so you can take advantage of that full height. Or even like long-term storage bins that stack on each other and designed to stack and not collapse. Like those are great uses of the space. The other thing with that is looking at the bin to protect or compile your items, right? So I know we mentioned the Stereolite bin, which we'll have up here, but these are great for like paper projects, especially because the lids lock. So nothing's coming out, nothing's coming in. If something spills, likely we'll be fine. It's protecting those items that are in there. And it's also great, like if you have projects that you're in the process of where you want to keep all the parts together,
Mhm.
or like Legos or something like that, where you have a knitting. Those are great for those types of things. Or they're good for like any temporary transitional categories. So like when we were doing home improvements, like we would have all the project pieces for that home improvement project in that bin.
Mhm. So basically, we are improving our lives one container at a time.
Absolutely. It's less to manage on a weekly basis too when you have the bins. We talked about that at the beginning, but you're just dusting one bin versus dusting all those items that are in the bin. And sometimes, especially with the organizers, like a makeup organizer or a desk organizer, it makes it easier to access the items that you want to use. So, like on a makeup organizer, they'll have like a little section for brushes, and they'll have a section for palettes and all the gadgets and lotions and potions, right? And you just spin it around and you get everything that you want. And it just makes it so much easier. There's not that hardness of digging through drawers and trying to find all your pieces.
Absolutely. And when you do that simple type of organizing, then you can really go all out on like hobby organizers, because that's a whole nother party right there. Because these are, particularly with hobbies or like woodworking or craft, any of it, they have very specific holders for very specific items. And I'm talking about like bobbin holders when you're a seamstress, or if you do woodworking, there's all these different types of like heating tools and all these different screwdrivers and whatever. Or knitting is the same thing, all kinds of different size of knitting needles and types of yarn and looms and all kinds of things. And those are very hard to DIY. The replicate DIY never really works quite as well. So this is when you can go all out on your hobby organizing and and get specifically what you need.
Yeah. And I think an example that probably we all have is a knife block, in our home, where it's like, it holds the knives. It doesn't really do much else, but if you know you're going to use knives and you want that knife block, like that's the perfect solution for you. So you're only investing again when you know those are the hobbies you're sticking with and that you're passionate about. Um, and then finally, containers can help us save space. So especially like if you have a lot of board games that you don't want the boxes or, like the Tide Pods, they call it decanting, which is just basically taking the items from the bag or the packaging that it came in and putting it into another container. Very fancy word. So, for me, like we decant our Tide Pods because they come in such a big bag that it just makes sense to do that.
And board games, we have a lot of board games, and it's basically, I have consolidated down. I use those small zip top mesh bags that are very stable, and I put a lot of the board games in those mesh bags. We can have a picture of that too. It makes a difference. You can store a whole lot more in those than with those big boxes. We said earlier that we would circle back around to this, but before you buy, measure, 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 measure twice, buy once. One of the simplest habits that's going to save money and frustration is to measure first for whatever container it is. And you need to measure the width, the depth, the height of both the space and the container. You need to check for clearance between the shelves. If there's a lip on the shelf, you have to be aware of that because that impacts the ability to get the container in and out, both on the shelves and the drawers, especially if you have like the doors that open and close and have the hinges. You need to make sure the clearance between the hinge and the edge, not the door. So really, really measure very, very carefully. Um, don't trust that the container is the same. Always check the measurements. And I'll give you a good example. The black containers with the yellow lids that are sold like at Home Depot and Lowe's and Menards. Apparently, they're not all the same size. They may all hold 66 quarts or whatever it is, but the dimensions are not the same. So never assume. Always check the dimensions. They're on the label at the end of the container, and it's really important. You will not be as disappointed. You do not want to go and buy a bunch of containers assuming that that you buy some from this place and some from that place, assuming that they're the same dimensions, and you get them home and they don't fit. Huge disappointment. So always check the measurements. Think about your organizing style and how you're going to use it, especially with the bins that have the fixed lids and opaque bins. You really need to think of the frequency, how easy or hard it's going to be to take the bin out, open the lid up, put something in. Or if you can't see in the bin because it's opaque, how frequently you're going to need to access it. Because I'll be honest, people will make some effort to get things out. Humans do not make any effort, and I don't care how old or young you are or how organized you're not. They really don't make any effort to put things back. If something is hard to put back, it's not going to be put back. And look at the containers as a whole. Does it narrow down? Does it have a deep ridge? Is that ridge taking up usable space on the inside? Is the material suitable for what you're storing? I mean, obviously you want archival boxes with archival material for sentimental items, papers that could disintegrate, pictures, that type of thing. Even the fabric over, if you're going to like store fabric in unbreathable boxes, how long are you going to be storing that fabric or those clothes from season to season? Be very aware of that. You don't want a moisture buildup, which could lead to mold and that type of thing. How easy is it to clean and does it fit your lifestyle? I mean, fabric bins are cute. They really are. They're very cute, but they are just stain magnets. They hold on to the stains. They're hard to clean. Wicker baskets also. I mean, everyone does those water hyacinth baskets, which are very, very, very attractive. But two things about them. They are a bloody dust magnet. You're going to need to use some type of, I don't know, one of those air pressurized things to get the dust off of them. And they also snag everything. I don't care if you put material in there or papers or whatever, they snag everything. So while they're very cute, you're going to need to maybe potentially have to put a liner in the wicker basket or just use it to hold magazines or books or cookbooks or something like that.
Yeah, those are definitely a good point, Mary, because I hate cleaning. And I read that book like one long time ago about how to keep your space clean. And one of the things they did say was those textures really matter. And so I try to keep that in mind. One of the other things though too is some stores like Amazon to an extent, but definitely like a Walmart, they let you buy in the bulk and then return them to the store. So you don't want to do that all the time or take advantage of the system. But sometimes you buy the bins and you think it's all going to work. Even as professional organizers, we do that. Or, honestly, sometimes I buy an extra bin or two because I just don't want to have to go back to the store in the middle of a job, right?
Mhm.
So definitely check the return policy and consider those companies that are a little bit more lenient with those. So Mary, do you want to talk a little bit about like kind of our favorite and least favorite, just kind of like a fun way to do it? Maybe we could talk about traditional containers and then non-traditional organizing systems.
Absolutely. I can, I'll definitely start with my least favorite, and I
Yeah.
have reasons why. Um, the one is I do not like flimsy cloth boxes. First of all, I talked about how they are stain magnets. Keeping them clean is not fun. But these flimsy cloth boxes, the ones that cost like $1.50 or whatever, even if you put another stiff insert in there, now you've spent $4 or $5. You might as well
Mhm.
go buy the premium box rather than spending money trying to make something work or fix it. So I don't like the cloth boxes. Now, the only time I like them is when they're good quality and they kind of become a decor issue that people are want the opaque and you can store things behind, but then you really can't label them because it's kind of like what you did with the floral boxes. It's a beautiful decor piece, but not necessarily storage.
Yeah.
The other piece is when you're considering those boxes, picking the larger 13-inch over the 11-inch cube, it really does open up a ton more space. But you need to double check to make sure what, if you're using those like calyx cubes or the ones that come from Target or Walmart, you need to measure those to make sure that what's going to fit in your space. I do not care for locker boxes because they taper at the bottom. So they start out wider and then they go down. So what you think is going to fit in there does not. I
Mhm.
find it very frustrating and not very useful. And once again, wicker, it is cute, but it catches and snags everything. I'm just not a huge fan. I love the look of it, but the functionality, to me, if I'm going to have a wicker basket, it is just a decor piece. And then those metal wire baskets with holes. The stores that don't charge very much have a lot of these. And let's be honest, everything falls through. If even a pencil cup, if you or a pen cup, if it's just kind of open wire, everything's just going to fall out. And I'm not a big fan of storing on flat baskets anyhow, because like I said, horizontal is hidden and vertical is visual. And for me, I can't stack things in a basket to go through. Everything to me has to be vertical on my desk. So not a huge metal basket fan with the big holes. And also, apparently, you can hurt yourself on them. I've never done it, but apparently you can get your fingers all twisted up in it. And it's
I have twisted my fingers so many times with my clients, especially with the more traditional basket style, because you
Mhm.
go pick it up and there's no real handle. You just grab through the holes and then it's heavy. And so yeah, it can hurt. Not
Yeah.
damaging, but it's just like, why do you want a bin that hurts you? You know?
Right.
We don't
Yeah.
need that in our lives.
No, no, we do
Mary,
not.
one of the things you said about the cloth boxes, that was something that I did last year when I was redoing my office, was looking at them. And they're very expensive, but they are, like you said, called the premium ones. But one of the factors too is I definitely take the 13-inch. It's a huge difference. It's like a TV. That 2 inches is a huge difference.
Mhm.
But I found mine on Amazon, which I think is a great option, like because they have the open box or they'll have like a deal on a whole set of them. But
Mhm.
one of the things to consider is how are you getting that bin off of the shelf? Because I started stretching mine out because I would pull on the handle like you're looks like you're supposed to do. So I try to actually buy the ones that have the built-in handle now if it's a frequently used cube.
Oh, okay. So that it's basically you put your hand in and grab the whole thing, not get hold of the metal material handle, but it has an opening that you can pull the whole box.
Yeah, and I'll put a photo up so people can kind of see the difference. I thought I
Mhm.
would like these more because they have the tags, but you could just buy the clip over tags, which we
Okay.
can put a link. And none of this is affiliated, by the way. This is just us sharing our knowledge with you. We we don't make any money by telling you this stuff.
No, we don't. I also am not a huge fan of plastic drawers. They are hard to
Mhm.
clean. They get torqued out of, they're very weight sensitive, so then they get shifted out of proportion or torqued. A lot of them don't come out of their frame, so you really can't pull the whole thing out. It's just not, maybe it's fine if you're off in college, but at this point, they're just not useful. I rather save my pennies and get something more substantial than the plastic drawers, the
And they're
typical
really
type.
hard to keep organized because, like you said, even when you were talking about your dresser, when you pull it, all that stuff inside that drawer is now shifting to the front and then all the way to the back. They don't have like rollers like a traditional drawer, even like a slider. It's just force and force.
Hmm.
So if it's anything other than like clothes or something soft, they're all gonna get banged back and forth.
Right. I just it's a personal thing. I just don't care for them.
So kind of changing our tone a little bit too. Now we know kind of what not to look for when we're buying a bin. There are some bins that I just think are like staple bins. You know, if you have them, you can use them, you can change them up. So we'll put a couple of them, but really for me, I do like investing in the clear bins
Mhm.
or the opaque bins that are big enough to hold things, but also narrow enough that you can really customize them to fit as best as possible on your shelves. They came out really big with the Container Store, and these actually also work really great in freezers if you're trying to organize your freezer because they're tall enough, right, to hold a lot of stuff. I feel like these are a great investment, and most of them are $5 or less. So these are not like super expensive. Um, I know, Mary, that you have some of like the home edit ones though that are a little bit more if you don't find them on sale.
I got mine on sale.
Yeah, me
I
too.
I I always buy mine on sale when they go on sale at I think it's Walmart.
Yeah.
I am never ever going to be able to. I just won't pay that type of money for that. I mean, it's a delightful product. I obviously like it. I'm frugal. So yeah, that's the
But the nice thing is when you are buying, because we did go through this whole process and we hopefully you have, right? You've done your mindset, you've zoned, you decluttered. When you're buying these bins, like I don't mind spending $5 on it because I know that that's gonna probably last me years and years, either in that space or in a different one. So it is worth the investment. But you again, that's why it's really important to follow this process and why we waited so long to talk about containers.
because they are the fun ones, but you have to get the right. And then, that kind of leads into the whole conversation around spending money on specialized storage. Sometimes you really do have to have specialized storage. I know I do. I mean, for fragile items, like I have glass hearts and I've been collecting them forever. And I have a specialized container that each one has its own unique little sits in there, and it's wrapped up tightly and it's surrounded by hard side, and it's safe. And the same thing, nutcrackers. I bought a specialized container for my collection of nutcrackers. I mean, particularly since we're doing this a little after Christmas. This is the type of thing that you can look and invest in. And a lot of times after Christmas, this stuff goes on sale.
Mhm.
So there you
So,
go.
Mary, where did you get your bins?
I actually got them from Amazon. And of course, they have a great return policy,
Mhm.
but I've never had to because I read the description. And this is pro tip, read the description carefully, particularly the measurements. I know I'm harping on this, but it will make your life easier. Particularly the measurements, and make sure that it will fit everything you need it to fit and it will fit in the space that you want to put it in. So I really have a lot of good luck with Amazon. When you're looking at specialized containers, it is an investment of money, although not that much. But you're right. This is my permanent storage. I'm not going to need to change or upgrade what I've purchased for these specialized items.
And those also take a lot more space, right? And again, that's where we said, like, when you get organized, sometimes it takes more space than when you were
Mhm.
disorganized, right? Because you can cram a lot into a bag, but if you actually want to protect the items,
Yeah.
it gets a little bit bigger.
Yeah, we've said this over and over again. Organized areas take up more room, and people are surprised about that, which is why you really need to get the correct containers for the correct items for the correct space. All right, so those are, we just talked about some of the classic workhorses with the containers. which I think everybody knows about. But we also love some of the creativity you can do with organization. And sometimes the best solution isn't even a container, or it may be a container, but it's not called a container. So I want to look at some of our unique favorites and some of the stuff we've learned to pass on.
Great. I'll start off on this one. A few of my favorites is the S hooks, so those are really great to, if you have wire shelving, you can hang them off there, you can hang them off the rafters. They just have a huge variety. And I found a couple Velcro straps, and one's actually like a wire strap, which is good if you have some bulkier items. And again, we'll show those up here on the screen now.
And I like magnetic bars. And we talked about that at our last live. And the magnetic bars, yeah, I got mine at Harbor Freight. I'm sure you can get them other places. Once again, nothing is sponsored. But boy, you can use magnetic bars in a ton of places, not just to organize tools, organize crafts, organize your knives, organize your scissors. I'm all for magnetic bars, let me tell you.
Yeah, and yeah, on our last live, which we do every month, and we have one coming up here on January 14th if you're watching it real time, but we have them again every month, so just see the description box below. But one of the reasons why they specifically mentioned Harbor Freight was one of our team members has it, and they have the holes, so they use the over the door racks,
Mhm,
and they hang them on there, so it gives them more opportunity than if they had to drill it or glue it onto a surface.
mhm. Or you could use your S hooks to hang it from something too.
Or
The
you
ones
could use your
like
favorite, Mary, your cruise magnets.
my cruise magnets. I do love some cruise magnets, and I got those also on Amazon. They are extra strong. I mean, they really hold. And I use that. They can hold a wreath on a door if you have a metal place to put it. They can. I use them. I use them everywhere. Any place that has metal, they will adhere to. And then when we cruise, I take them with me and put them on the walls because the ship's walls are all metal. People don't think about that. And you can hang your paper information up there. You can hang your makeup kit. You can do everything. I do love some cruise magnets, and you can find those at Amazon as well.
Yeah. There's the 3M hooks. I either kind of a love it or hate it. The trick they say to that is to really make sure that your wall is super clean before you put them on. So dust it, wipe it down, really make sure that it's clean and dry. But also, I found that you can't leave them on too long. So they're great either for permanent storage, like you want to hook there forever, or temporary, like holiday type storage. What has been your experience?
Yeah, and I love 3M hooks. I really do. But I use them in my bathroom to hang my jewelry from, my necklaces. And then we did some changes and I took them all down. And even as careful as I was, they took wallboard with them.
Yeah.
They had been up there more than a year, probably a couple of years, and my husband had to repair all the drywall because no matter how careful I was, it took that top layer off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Even with the hair dryers and going
I
slow, it just doesn't
mhm.
seem to work.
It was tough. It was disappointing actually because I do love a 3M hook. You know?
Speaking of sticking things there, Mary, your paper towel holder was the talk of the town recently. Do you want to share about that?
We had people come in for the season, the kind of the last get together before we all go back to normalcy. And they're in the kitchen and they're all oohing and awing. I have a magnetic paper towel holder on the refrigerator. I've had it 4 years. I don't even know where I got it. I've had it so long. And they were like, that is the coolest thing ever. Well, you're right. It keeps the paper towels off the kitchen. You don't have to drill in for holes. It keeps them off the counter. And I actually hang mine vertically so that it doesn't start rolling and spinning and just have a bunch of paper towels on the floor. Yeah, that was the hot thing. Everybody's like, God, that's the coolest thing ever. Where'd you get that from?
Mhm.
Who knew?
The other cool thing is pegboards, and I think that they kind of gone out of style, or we think of them just in garages. Although one of our members did a really great garage organization, so we can pin that video here too if you're more interested in that. But they have so many hooks and shelves. Even the Dollar Tree now has pegboard systems. I mean,
Mhm.
really a lot of options out there for you. And those again are great for vertical. Vertical being visual, they're great for your butterflies and bees.
Oh, absolutely. And they could hold anything, everything from necklaces to craft supplies to kitchen supplies to garage supplies. As far as you can imagine it, it can happen with a pegboard. And my totally favorite is the index card pouch for labeling bins, which I did get off of Amazon. It is a peel and stick pouch that holds a 4x6 index card. You just slide it in, stick it on the bin, and as the contents of the bin changes, you can change the index card without any problems. We talked about what we like, so let's talk a little bit about what we personally choose to pass on. And I know neither of us care for vacuum seal bags. I know you have issues because Adrian, you feel like that if things are stored in there too long, they have that really heavy plastic smell, which is not pleasant at all. Particularly, obviously, we're storing clothing and soft goods in there. For me, I just can't ever get anything laid out well enough that all the wrinkles are not just forced right into the material. So, not a huge fan of the vacuum seal bags. I think neither of us also care for it's a very popular thing. It's a square box, and there's a place for your aluminum foil and your wax paper and your plastic wrap and whatnot, or your different size Ziploc bag containers. I think that's a kind of a waste. To me, if you have a drawer big enough to put that in, then you have a drawer where you can just put your stuff in an organized fashion. You do not need to spend that extra money on that container. There may be cases where you don't have the drawer space and maybe you need to keep it out on the counter, and that's a different problem solving situation. But to put it in your drawers, I just don't think that's necessarily for me, it's not a good use of space. Pre-made cord labels are unnecessary. I rather, and I know Adrian, you too, you rather do it with washi tape. It's just you can use the colors you want that make sense to you, and do the labels, mark them as you choose to mark them. Once again, it needs to make sense to us. Any type of organizing needs to make sense to only us and our family. It doesn't, nobody's going to come and tell you the organizing police are not going to show up. So pre-made cord labels are not a necessary purchase. Let's talk about where we can buy things, where you can buy some of these organizing goodies. So there are all kinds of great solutions, both specialized and generalized, unique and bulk. So let's talk about some of the best places to shop. I'm going to start with some of the stores. I'm sad to say, once again, we're not sponsored by anybody. Dollar Tree is becoming, it has some really good stuff, but the prices keep creeping up and the quality is going down and the bin sizes are getting smaller, which is where I talk about measuring. The bin that you used was always like 13 inches long, now is like 10. It doesn't fit paper anymore. So make sure you're aware of the dimensions before you go in and automatically buy what you always have. And it is good though for some seasonal storage, some seasonal organizing. They have a huge flux in January and June. So at the beginning of the year, they'll have all kinds of containers and stuff. Just be judicious when you buy. Make sure you need it, the measurements are correct, and it will fit both the items you're organizing and the space you're putting it in. The same thing in June, they'll do another push on organizing. I'm also, the Container Store is great for very specialized items, but overall, I think it's very pricey. And so if there's something very specific, like I do have a specific bin that I buy and can only find at the Container Store. It's a drawer style bin. It's probably, as wide as any normal drawer and as deep. And I can't find it anywhere else. So I do purchase it at the Container Store. But I think nowadays there are a lot of other places that produce just as good dupes. IKEA has really good, unique structural containers. Everybody talks about the Calyx bookcase, the Billy bookcase. They've got a rail system. They just have some really fun and creative and very affordable organizing products. Whether it's small or big, whether it's like magazine holders or office organizers, all the way up to, like I said, the big bookcases and desks and that type of thing. Walmart and Target, lots and lots of dupes for the Container Store. They have these three bins that are, I don't know, greatest of all times. They have a premium line, the Home Edit. There's a whole big Home Edit series in Walmart now. Personally, I wait for everything to go on sale. I'm frugal. Some would call me cheap. I'm going to be very careful where I spend my money. So when those go on sale, they have a big sale. Usually it's half price, so watch that. Walmart's also great for metal shelving. A lot of craft stores have some very one-of-a-kind storage bins, or even metal planters or hobby-related organizing items that you can use to organize. They have beautiful cardboard boxes or archival approved boxes for photos and that type of thing to store. TJ Maxx and Home Goods, I love them both. They have some wonderful sources. Here's the thing. When you see it, you kind of need to see if you can either get it all right there or if you can get it online in multiples, if you need four of something. Because as we all know, their inventory just rotates around. So you may not be able to go back and buy more. They're pretty good with some one-off things. The pro tip is jump online while you're in the store and see if you can get multiples and just ship to the store and get as many as you need at that point. Places like Harbor Freight, Lowe's, Home Depot, any of the home improvement stores, oh my gosh, they've got all kinds of wonderful bins. And their laundry section, they've got pegboards and prefab shelves and trim, all kinds of wonderful stuff. You just have to kind of start looking around, and you would be amazed at what you can find at all of these different places. And we would love to hear where you found some of your best organizing items. You can definitely leave them below in the comments or join us on our lives and share then. So that is my summary of where to get everything. As we wrap up this deep dive into containers, and remember, we said we'd have a container conversation, this key takeaway. The goal is not to achieve that whole fantasy magazine worthy look. Remember, we talked about do not become your fantasy organizer. The goal is to make your life easier. Containers are just tools. They don't magically solve the clutter. What they do is help manage the categories that you've already created.
So next week we're going to conclude our organizing series with the optimizing and maintaining steps. We're going to talk about them together in our video. And if you have any organizing, decluttering questions, or you have any other productivity questions, come join us on one of our monthly lives. We do have one coming up the middle of this month, but if you miss it, you can always just send us an email or you can join us in a future month. We'd love to have you. So Mary, it's been great talking about containers with you. Cheers, my
Absolutely.
friend.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye bye.